Shouting at the wind. Manus went back to bed at 9:45. He'd been up at 6:30 and made his child, Sharifa, and himself porridge. She was old enough to be doing for herself, but their time together was limited, and he was aware how precious it was. So he saw her off to school by 7:30, and after tea, fag, and toilet, he went back in his bed for 8 o'clock. He liked to take an hour each morning for self-awareness, lie on his back and try to focus on his breath or whatever, in an attempt to give himself a little space between himself and his merry, or often not so merry-go-round, thoughts. He was usually too groggy from all the hash he smoked the night before, but he still constantly made a point of taking that hour. He had fitted it in even when they'd caught him in some job or government scheme, an hour off from the slavery of routine dross. These days, as an unemployed man of leisure, he often went back for a second hour. The smug security of his luxurious Western life left twinges of guilt when he thought of the billions of people in the rest of the world whose country's resources get funneled to the West while they lived in poverty, hardship, and often the turmoil of wars directly related to control of their resources. Manus thought he, as one of the wealthy Westerners who benefited from the robbery of the resources, should do something about their plight. He had freedom to protest the injustices that he benefited from. There were no organisational skills to make any kind of an effective protest. Protest needed mass awareness for a start. People's heads seemed too full with other things, game shows and computer games and trivia about pop or sport or movie stars. And of course, getting to work and paying the rent and the kids' clothes, and even if they had the chance to think for a moment, they'd already been indoctrinated into accepting the status quo as inevitable and unchangeable. There had always been kings and peasants, haves and have-nots, rulers and the ruled. It was a natural state of the world. Thinking it could be some other way was for dreamers. Consider yourself lucky you live with the wealthy, and never you mind about the injustice of the world. Look after yourself. The message pumped from on high reverberated from all sides. He saw the computer games the very young children played, where a character runs at fantastic speed trying to pick up as many little trinkets as he can while he runs round the track. I just thought it was like a life plan for them. Whoever has the most trinkets at the end wins. The amount of trinkets is the amount of success one enjoys in life. Still stuck in some kind of counterculture loop from the 60s, Annis had reopened a social centre, a place not centred on money, where people could meet. People going out to socialise for the night without spending money seemed to Manus almost like a revolutionary act, a blow against the corporate empire. Okay, hardly a massive blow, but still, each night was some kind of victory, a small sample of a direction the world could go in. There were anarchists involved. The space was actually the old Shomer Spree building. When that collective had collapsed, an individual from the collective had become the new lease signee and had maintained its many social functions. That is, the Repeal Group still retained use of the space for meetings, banner making and fundraising, as did Dublin Central Housing Action, Refugee and Migrant Solidarity, Anti-Racism Network, Young Friends of the Earth, the LGBTQ, Glitterhole Group, and many other worthwhile organisations. Worker Solidarity, Rabble, and Dublin Digital Radio still rented space there and had their own gigs. All great stuff, but all separate, specific agendas. A Monday night gig was to be for anyone and everyone that was sick of having their leisure time parcelled out in pubs or other profit-driven venues. At first, Manus was unsure if anyone else would be interested. People at social media these days, what do they want with social centres? What did he want with a social centre? Sometimes he was not the most sociable of characters. Still, he wanted somewhere to go out to, other than a pub of an evening. Somewhere He could be sociable or even quietly unsociable in public if he chose. People took the ball and ran with it instantly. High quality musicians played solos and jammed with others. Pizzas were cooked and served free all night. People danced. People performed acts of juggling and such alongside the musicians. They weren't allowed to fire, but they had a small barbecue set up in the yard, which Manus kept stoked with briquettes. It was a happening event. If people had a few quid, they could throw it in the donations glass. If they were skint, no problem. It wasn't much in the world, a free fun night, but it was something. Monday socials. Today was Thursday. There was a meeting scheduled for later that night talking about corporate impunity and community resistance. He'd got himself a ticket. I'm wondering what it would be like. Sharifa would be back in a few hours and he would be there for her. She wouldn't want to go to the meeting. While more informed and concerned about the state of the world than most, she was still a teen from the 21st century and more concerned with her peer group, her technology and herself more than anything else. On the dole, Manus was richer than most. He didn't feel he had to run on a treadmill picking up trinkets till he died. He had time for his daughter and time to consider community resistance to corporate crimes. He had time to go back to bed a second time and try again for an hour's self-awareness. Just as he was starting, he got a text. He thought not to look for an hour, but then he looked. It was from Liam. Long time no hear from. He had a look at the text. They arrested Assange this morning, said the text. It wasn't Manus going to the cells. He didn't want to give in to some impotent emotional rage. Still, he felt sick, angry, frustrated, sad. This is what happened if you were an effective protester. They hunted you and hounded you and captured you and silenced you and punished you. Not the old, safe, ineffectual Manus. Assange was smart and competent. He put into public view things that the rich and powerful didn't want the public to know, things that the public should know. It seems exposing the crimes of the powerful to the public wasn't enough, though. The images from collateral murder merged with a multitude of other images. The importance of the truth is drowned out by advertising, games, celebrities, and paying the rent and getting food in. Who cares about the truth? Why should the slaughter of innocents, ecological disaster, or nuclear destruction, all fueled by corporate greed, have any more relevance than the newest movie? And of course, the amount of money spent on advertising the latter would bury the amount spent on the former. And apart from bums like Manus, who had the time to care? The smart man, Assange, smart and confident that you can't get busted for telling the truth, confident that the world wouldn't let you be punished for exposing crimes committed by the powerful. And sure, Julian, be smart, Manus thought from the safety of his ineffectual life. Have right on your side. But when you expose the crimes of the super rich, don't be confident that the world's laws will stand up to the power of those you expose. Don't be confident that the Western population will come out on the streets and stop the imprisonment of those that expose the truth. Liam texted again to say Kieran O'Reilly was back in Dublin and we stood outside the GPO between 4 and 6. Kieran had been camping outside the Ecuadorian embassy for a few months, 24/7. He had to leave on Wednesday night to come back to Ireland and fix up his Australian passport, and the cops hit on Thursday morning. Kieran had asked Manus to go over and camp with him. Manus had Amira to look after, but if he hadn't, he might have joined Kieran. Just sat outside the embassy saying, this injustice should end. He might not, or he might not have stayed long if he did. What good would it do? Assange was a cause. Free Assange. A cause worth fighting for, worth going to Nick for, Worth camping out in the streets of London for. But what would such actions gain? It would give people a reminder that we should keep our human empathy and not give way to fundamentalist consumerism. That we should care when innocent people are murdered. And we should care when publishers get imprisoned for publishing such crimes. It would give the campers a feeling of action being taken. It might give the victims a boost to know that people still cared. Or it might just prove how ineffectual such passive protests are and depress the life out of all concerned. A few million might have an effect. A few on their own were nothing much. Sometimes it seemed like just bearing witness, shouting out to the wind. Mostly the wind just whistled on by. Manus hadn't gone to London to camp outside the Ecuadorian embassy with Kane. Maybe he would go down, stand with him at the GPO. Maybe there would be a few there. They could console each other and remind each other that they cared and that it was right to care and right to do something, say something about the injustice. Maybe he would go down, maybe not. Manus got a text from George Kerwin, who had argued with Manus before on the importance of defending Assange. Sorry about Assange's arrest, said the text. Sure. Is that what it took? Assange to get trailed off before people realised all the nonsense they'd been talking about him was just that, nonsense. None of it mattered now. The false accusations, the character assassination, no longer important. His one and only real crime, exposing the truth, the only thing left. Manus tried for a second hour of self-awareness. Later, he got up and didn't resist for long before checking on the net for footage of the arrest. He was a voyeur at a peep show, or was it a snuff movie? All the uniforms in one white-haired, bearded, hunted, trapped, and now caught man. Fox and hounds. Manus didn't feel so good, and he didn't want to sit alone. He texted a woman called Avril. Julian Assange got arrested. I feel sickened. How are you? Said his text. It's hard to say exactly why he texted her. To say she was an old flame wouldn't really have been true. She had occasionally shagged him for short periods of time in between habitats or boyfriends, when she was at a loose end or even as a revenge shag over the years. So every now and then he would text her on the off chance. You could say he was motivated by sex, but human contact, company, any kind of exchange would have done. His sexual desires were tamed these days. Shadows of the raging needs that once consumed him. He was older. Still, every now and then he craved something, sent Avril a text. Occasionally she would have a need, or at least a use for him, but mostly she would just ignore it. There'd hardly have been a hope in the text he sent now. It was more like a need to try, like shouting out to the wind. She texted back. Whoa, fancy that. He wondered why. Did she have a need? What was it? Physical? Mental? Emotional? His heart didn't skip a beat or anything. If it did, it was hardly noticeable and under control within the second. This was Avril. This was not love. It could even be Avril telling him off for harassing her with texts. Sometimes he could fulfill her need for a whipping post. But she texted, I was just reading about it. It's so shit. I thought of you too when I was reading it. I'd been really ill, actually. On the mend now. We should meet for coffee when I'm a bit better. Apart from feeling sickened by that shitty news today, how are you? Sweet, really. Some kind of click. She thought about him when she read of the arrest, and he thought to text her. They had Assange in common. He texted her back. Said, apart from the Assange news, he was grand. Thanked her for the text and said he didn't understand why she didn't communicate with him more. Was that too hassly? Told her he had reopened the social centre and how it was the best fun you could have with your clothes on. Too explicit in the reference, maybe. He told her he had a few more stories on some internet mag called The Voice. Was he trying to make out he was having some success with his writing? He got no response to those stories. Again, it was back to shouting a message to the wind. The wind whistled on by. He asked her what she had been sick with. She didn't text back. He wasn't surprised. He wasn't supposed to let it bother him. It was a normal enough a scenario in his relationship or non-relationship with Avril. He wasn't expecting enough to be disappointed when he didn't receive it. Still, as usual in their communication, he felt like he had been cut off mid-conversation. Sometimes he said she sent texts that he didn't receive, a confusing and frustrating factor to be thrown into the mix. He sent another 2 texts, no reply. Then he phoned her. She was irritated with him for hassling her. She said she had sent him a text which he had not received, and she was now annoyed that he didn't realise she had sent him a text. Plus, he was always going on at her, hassling her that she should communicate with him more. And anyway, a friend turned up unexpectedly to my home, she said, giving a full explanation. Like Manus, whatever he was to her, wasn't a friend. And in all the years she had known him, she had never told him her home address. He would resist texting her again, and should she happen to be in the area, or whatever, again, he would probably still welcome her. But at the same time, she never called again. He wouldn't die or cry. Manus didn't go down and meet Kieran at the GPO, enough crying into the wind for one day. He didn't go to the top and fighting back against the corpos either. He would go out another day and stand alongside a few others with a mat or maybe even a proper big banner which read Free Assange. Maybe someday he would be capable of sitting in on some corporate resistance meetings and he could join with others in fighting back. In the meantime, the Monday Socials crew were putting on a gig on a Sunday, celebrating the anarchist story of Spain between the world wars. That event was hardly a great antidote to the happenings on the world stage at the present, but for the personal lives of those that went, it was at least something. And the Monday nights in Jigsaw were empowering themselves. Years of social centres, quite like the old Shomer Spree and the present Jigsaw, were a forerunner of the anarchist society in Spain. Not government-backed, but people-run social centres, created breathing spaces, free from corporate messages or profit-driven needs, where people could take their bearings, maybe have time to consider how their world is run. Maybe, even given enough spaces of the kind, people would have the freedom to think about issues like a man publishing the crimes of the powerful, a man like Julian Assange should be free